Good day, everyone. This is your first recorded lecture for Bioethics, Chapter 1. So, we proceed with the definition of ethics. The word ethics is derived from Greek ethos, which means character. And ethics refers to standard of behavior that tells us how human beings ought to act in the many situations in which they find themselves as friends, parents, children, citizens, business people, teachers, professionals, and so on. In other words, if we say ethics, it's a set of standard of behavior which is being imposed to a group of person or a population, and it is also a branch of philosophy that involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of right and wrong conduct. So it is our definition, or it is our guide in determining whether an act or a decision is ethically right or wrong. Moving forward, we let us differentiate rather between ethics and morality. Although both of them knows what is right and wrong, ethics is a standard of good and bad, right or wrong, that are imposed. The word is imposed by some outside group or a society, a profession, for example. A good example in this is ethical standards of nursing. So we have ethical standards of nursing which says what nurses should do, or which impose what nurses should do and should not do based on the standards of our profession. And for example, here in the Philippines, we also have ethics. Okay, it is being imposed by the society. It helps us to determine whether or not an action is right or wrong. Take note that I am not saying, or I'm not saying that it is legal or not legal, because later on we will also be differentiating between ethics and law. Now, moving forward, as we differentiate ethics and morality, morality, on the other hand, is one's own personal sense of right and wrong. So, a while ago, we said that ethics is being imposed by a certain organization or a society. In morality, on the other hand, it is a personal sense of right and wrong. It is not being imposed by anyone. It is what you personally think is good and bad. And our moral, or our morality, is influenced by our values, our principles, beliefs, customs, and ways of living. So how you have been raised up by your family, or your by parents, or your parents, for example, the values that were inculcated or imbibed in you as you are growing up, those have molded your morality, and those are now guiding you in making decisions of what is right and what is wrong. Now, these two, or there are situations wherein ethics and morality can have a conflict. One may live in a society that agrees on certain code of conduct that you personally disagree. For example, you might think that euthanasia, when applied to old and terminally ill patient, is right, but the standard of our profession says otherwise, right? Because euthanasia is considered unethical, okay, in the nurses code of ethics. And in this situation alone, it is apparent that your personal belief as a nurse may not, or may differ from that of being imposed in the ethical code of conduct for nurses. Okay, so that's the difference between ethics and morality. Now, these are the questions that ethics seek to know. And to sum it up, ethics wants to give a guide on identifying actions that are right or wrong. Ethics wants to um, give concept on or give us the idea of what decisions we should make given certain situations. And when it is also our basis of judging whether an action that has been done is good or bad. Now, this is what I was talking about. We also need to differentiate between ethics and law. Of course, law, as we all know, is or are agreed upon rules of the society, while ethics, on the other hand, is defined as professional standard or conduct of action in relating to others. So, let's expound on that. Law, these are formal rules that govern how we should live in a society. Okay? They emphasize what we must do and most often what we should not do. And they create an foreseeable standard of behavior for social justice and peace. In other words, law is stricter. Okay? It's stricter and it has much narrow focus than that of ethics. Because going back to ethics, these are rules of conduct. It may come within a person or within an individual, within a profession, within a society, and we decide. It is up to the person to decide what is right or wrong. Another one that differentiate law from ethics is that when we violate a certain law, it has a corresponding punishment. But when we violate a certain ethical conduct, it may not necessarily lead to a punishment. Okay? As long as it is not against the law. Okay? So, that's the difference. Therefore, we always say that there are some actions that may be lawful but unethically accepted or ethically unaccepted. There are also some actions that may be ethically good or ethically accepted, but they are unlawful or they are against the law. Now, I asked you last meeting to identify a certain situation wherein you believe that something was right, but the law says it is illegal, and you have given your examples. Now, I'll give you an example. For example, in other countries, there are already laws that legalize abortion and euthanasia. However, despite this, there are a lot of people who think that euthanasia as well as abortion are against our ethical conduct or against our ethical principles because it is unethical to kill, right? So, these are examples of situations wherein they are considered, they may be considered legal but unethical. Okay? So, moving on, we are now ready to define bioethics. So, bioethics comes from the Greek word bios, which means life, and ethikos, which means character. So, basically, bioethics is an application of ethics in the field of medicine and healthcare. Now, there are important precedents in the history of bioethics, and one of this is the Tuskegee syphilis experimentation, which was a big controversy in the field of medicine and research back in 1932 to 1972. So I asked you to read or to research on what happened during the Tuskegee syphilis study. And to sum it up, we said that or we found out that the Tuskegee syphilis study happened in Alabama, USA in 1932 to 1972. And it was conducted, the experimentation was conducted among Black Americans or African Americans, because that time they are very vulnerable, and it was very easy for the scientists and the doctors, the researchers, to recruit or to convince them to participate in the said experiment. However, there are a lot of rights that were violated, the rights of the participants that were violated. One of which we identified was autonomy, because they have been deceived of the real nature of the experimentation. They were not told of what will happen. They were not told of the risk, of the benefits, and they were bribed. In other words, yeah, they were deceived. And this is against the autonomy of a person, or the right of a person to give an informed consent, right? Because in order for you to elicit um, informed consent, you must divulge the nature, the true nature of the study, and the risk as well as the benefits. Okay, so it's against the autonomy or the right of the person to decide for their own um, medical, and for their own um, participation in the said study. And there was also a violation of their of beneficence. Okay, the principle of beneficence, which is doing good, because despite knowing that there are 300 plus who have tested positive in with syphilis, they were not given proper treatment. Okay, they were not given proper treatment because the real nature or the real purpose of the study is to look into the progress of the disease. So they were not given any medication despite the fact that penicillin was already available during that time. And then there was also a violation of the principle of non-maleficence, doing no harm, because they have conducted a lot of invasive procedures to the patients, and it caused some to die, right? It Because they were not given proper treatment, it caused them to transfer or to infect their families, especially their wives during that time. So the more that syphilis has spread, and those are the ethical principles or bioethical principles that were violated in this experiment. Because of that, it has created a huge controversy, and it led to an investigation that was conducted by by the experts, and it led this experimentation led to the Belmont report. Now, the Belmont report summarized the ethical principles and guidelines for research involving human subjects, and it was in Belmont report that the core principles of um, health research were identified, which are respect for persons or your autonomy, beneficence, and justice. Now, the Belmont report provided an analytical framework to guide the resolution of ethical problems arising from research involving human subjects. Another precedent that happened during that time is on the Nazi experimentation. Okay, so the Nazi experimentation happened in Germany during the World War II. And during the Nazi experimentation, there were a lot of gruesome and inhumane experimentation that were done, especially to the prisoners, not only to adult population but also to young children, especially even babies were involved in this experimentation. So I hope that you have read about these experimentations, and it was really a violation of human rights. It was a violation of the sanctity of life, and there were so many people who were killed just for the sake of scientific investigation. And of course, these are considered immoral, unethical, and illegal. So, because of this, there was also an investigation conducted, and it led to the Nuremberg Code of 1947. And the Nuremberg Code of 1947 became the guide of until now, it serves as a guide for researchers, healthcare researchers, even the doctors and nurses who would like to undergo researches to follow. These are guides that we need to follow, guidelines that we need to follow in order to ensure that there are no violations to the human rights, and there are no violations to ethical principles. So those are some of the precedents that led to the formation or the creation of other principles in bioethics. Now, what about healthcare ethics? Healthcare ethics is concerned with the moral nature of health or healthcare, that standards and goals of the healthcare professions and the responsibilities of communities to provide for healthcare needs. Now, these are the current ethical issues in healthcare. We have balancing equity and efficiency. This is very relevant and timely nowadays. We have been suffering from this pandemic for more than 6 months now, and our healthcare resources are now depleting. They are now insufficient. So it's the principle of justice, okay, distributive justice, wherein we need to follow or we need to abide with the principle of equality and equity and distributing these resources. What should we follow? Should we distribute these resources equally among all the people in the Philippines, or should we distribute it according to their needs? That's equity. Okay, that's the difference between equality and equity. If we say equality, you're going to distribute the available resources equally among the people, regardless of status in life, regardless of healthcare needs. If it is equity, you are going to distribute the resources based on the needs or demands of healthcare of that particular population. Okay, so that's the difference. It's very hard, right? I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, we have the SAP, the Social Amelioration Program, and the government followed the principle of equity, wherein they have prioritized giving assistance to poor, to the needy. Okay, and there are a lot of concerns that arouse. How about the middle income earners, right? What about them? They also have their needs. Okay, but the government did not have any choice, because we don't have sufficient funds or sufficient resources to give equal treatment to all individuals. Okay, so that's it. That's an ethical issue. Differences in health status. Okay, another one, aging population, access to care, elder abuse or neglect. It's not really very apparent yet in the Philippines, but in other countries, one of the debatable issues there in terms of healthcare is on their aging population, especially those who would put their parents, their older the older members of their family to home care. So in the home care, there are a lot of concerns there as to the treatment of the elders. Okay, they are abused, they are neglected. Okay, next is end of life issues. So you have suicide and euthanasia. In other countries, euthanasia, passive euthanasia is already legal, and despite it's being considered legal, there are a lot of people contesting its ethical acceptance, or its ethical it's at if whether it is ethical or not. Okay? We also have beginning of life issues. Okay, beginning of life issues, your genetic engineering, your in vitro fertilization. We also have allocation of donated organs and life organ donation. So you might have heard already people selling their kidneys, selling some of their organs to those who are in need of organ transplant. So the debate is whether this is ethical or not, whether this is legal or not. Okay, one of the controversies that arise in the early stage of finding cure or finding cure for COVID-19 is the plasma. Okay, some who have positive who have tested positive and recovered from the coronavirus or the COVID-19 virus were told that their plasma may be administered to those who are currently tested positive, and it might contribute to their treatment, right? So some have sold their plasma for hundreds of thousands, right? And there's a question there of whether it is ethically right or wrong. We also have research in healthcare. Until now, there's a debate whether human subjects should be allowed in the conduct of health researches, especially in drug development, okay, and other experimentations in order to innovate, okay. Shall we compromise life of this the life of these participants for the sake of finding treatment or finding solutions to existing health diseases, or the existing diseases or disorders, right? So these are some of the current ethical issues in healthcare. And these are the ethical principles of healthcare. We have beneficence, non-maleficence, respect for patients' autonomy, and justice. Okay, so now we go to professional ethics. So we're done with ethics, bioethics, healthcare, healthcare ethics. Now we go to professional ethics. Professional ethics are principles that govern the behavior of a person or a group in a business environment. Like values, professional ethics provide rules on how a person should act towards other people and institutions in such environment. So, since we do not always agree of what is right or wrong, there must be an ethical standard for the specific, which is specific for the profession, which I agree. That's why we have ethical code for nursing profession here in the Philippines. Because as I have said a while ago, if we rely on our personal judgment or belief of what is right and what is wrong, then who will determine now what is the standard of right or wrong if we do not have a professional code of ethics, right? That is why the code of ethics for nurses is very important, because it's an imposition of what is or what should be done during a given situation, which is ethical, which is unethical. Okay. Now, these are examples of professional ethics. For doctors, they have their Hippocratic oath, right? So, in their oath, they vow. Okay, it's like a vow to apply dietetic measures for the benefit of the sick according to their ability and judgment. Okay, that they will not harm their patients, that they will do anything in purity and holiness to guard life and their profession. In nursing, we also have the Nightingale Pledge, which I hope that you can memorize by heart, and not only memorize but understand its meaning and apply it in your future profession. So, therefore, ethical codes are systematic guidelines for shaping ethical behaviors. This answers the normative question of what beliefs and values are morally accepted. So, a formal statement of a group's ideals and values. It is a set of ethical principles that is shared by members of the group, reflect their moral judgment over time, and serves as a standard for their professional actions. Now, these ethical codes for nurses, okay, it was crafted based on a lot of factors. Law was considered. What else? The nature of our profession. What else? The morality that should be imbibed in our profession. Okay, the values that should be imbibed in our professions. All these were considered in crafting our ethical code of the ethics of the code of ethics rather for nurses. So your assignment is to read on the code of ethics for nurses in the Philippines and look into the salient points and provisions in the code. Okay, and I hope that you'll be able to think of situations wherein you may apply these ethical principles. Right now, these are also the purposes of Nursing Code of Ethics, which is to inform the public about the minimum standard of the profession and help them understand professional nursing conduct. Now, the purpose of the Nursing Code of Ethics is not only to protect the patients from getting harm, from getting from protecting their rights and not getting violated. Okay, it also protects the nurses. Okay, because by giving the nurses a set of guidelines of what is right and wrong, then it serves as a basis. Nurses are enlightened. Nurses know what to do. Nurses know how to react in a given situation. Okay? So that ends our first lecture for chapter 1. I hope that you have appreciated our discussion. And if you have some inquiries, you may ask them. Feel free to ask them in our chat box. Now, just to have a recap, we said that we said that we defined rather bioethics, ethics, the principles of bioethics, healthcare ethics, and professional code of ethics. So these are our bases later on when we are going to discuss about ethical dilemma or various ethical issues. So this will be our basis. Thank you very much everyone for listening. Have a good day.